Asmathguru Namaha, online classes for first PUC Science Biology. You are all enrolled in science subject with biology as one of the prime subjects. Biology is a subject that deals with your own body, your own system, and how about life processes, the animal world, the plant world, and so on. At first PUC, you will be learning something about your basic sciences, that is taxonomy with animals and plants. You will also be learning about human biology and plant biology. Today, I would be taking up one of the topics of your own body, that is anatomy of the human heart. Human physiology is a fundamental subject to understand how your body structure is, how these structures and organs function, and if at all they have some disease, how to treat that. So, to understand the overall future science, this basic biology comes very handy. Biology is a subject what you need to learn by thorough observation, by proper concentration and frequent reading. So, that makes a subject very easy. So, today I would be starting with the anatomy of the human heart. What is anatomy? Anatomy is the science that deals with internal structures, study of internal organs, study of internal structures. It is basically concerned with how the organs and structures make up your body. We would be starting with anatomy of the human heart. Before we get into the concept of anatomy, let us be introduced to some of the basic concepts of this anatomy of heart. Heart and blood vessels form the circulatory system or the transport system. In unicellular organisms, there is no requirement of a transport system, while in a multicellular organism, the complexity of the body makes transport system an essential part. In lower forms in invertebrates, we have already studied in our high schools that there are open circulatory systems, for example cockroach, whereas in higher animals, vertebrates, we find a closed circulatory system. Cardia in Greek means heart and vasculum in Latin means vessels, blood vessels. So, together we call it as cardiovascular system. Please note, cardiovascular system means it is referring to heart and blood vessels which supply blood to all parts of the body. Why do you think that heart and blood vessels were needed? If digested food has to be transported, if excretory substance have to be removed, oxygen has to be supplied, for all these there is a system which is very vital, and that is the blood and heart, which does the function of cardiovascular system. Let us come to the anatomy of the heart. Human heart is exactly in the thoracic cavity, in the chest cavity. That is position what we refer it to as mediastinum. Please note, mediastinum is the space between the lungs. If I just show it, the position of the heart is the thoracic cavity, and if I just fold my hand like this, it is the size of one's fist. The size of the heart is one's fist. Now, how is it protected? The protection is because of the rib cage and the sternum. You find a bone here in the center, that is the bone called sternum bone, and you find the rib cage on either side, that protects your thoracic cavity. Now, the size of the heart can vary from one person to another. It is about 12 centimeter in length. If you take the length of the heart, it is 12 centimeter, whereas the width is about 9 centimeter. Now, heart can weigh about 300 to 350 grams, and you find the heart, most of the times we write a love mark like this. Now, this is called as the cone part of the heart, while the top region is the apex or flat part of the heart, which we call it as base. So, the base is to the anterior side and cone is pointed towards the posterior side. If we go to the next concept, what are the protective coverings of the heart. Now, these words, what I have highlighted is very important. Please note, what is pericardium? A covering of the heart. Now, ಒಂದು ಕವರ್ ಮಾಡಿರೋ ಥರ ಒಂದು protective covering of the heart is called pericardium. Pericardium means it is the covering of the heart from outside, so it is pericardium. Now, it has an outer fibrous layer because it has to be rough and tough, and inner serous layer. We will learn about serous and fibrous a little later, but you have to know what is serous and fibrous coverings. Now, this serous layer and fibrous layer in between, if this is the fibrous layer outside and there is a serous layer inside, between this is a fluid. Now, that fluid is what we refer it to as the pericardial fluid. Now, this pericardial fluid is very important to prevent the rubbing or friction when the heart beats. Now, this can get infected. Please note, this can get infected and lead to pericarditis. Now, that is one of the rarest disease or what we can see. Here, pericardial fluid is again formed because of the blood, and this pericardial fluid is very important for functioning of the heart. Coming to the next one, what is the heart wall made up of? Now, heart wall, just like what you have your commercial walls, you have a brick layer, then you have a above layer of concrete or cement, and then you have paint. Like that, we have heart wall made up of 3 layers. One is the outermost layer called epicardium. I would like to tell you this pericardium is 2 layered, outer fibrous and inner serous layer, what I have already shown here. Now, this serous layer is also called as the epicardial layer, which we can also refer it as viscera. Please note, visceral pericardium. Idu parietal pericardium anta heltivi, idanna visceral pericardium. This is called visceral, this is called parietal. Viscera andre namma sharirada olagina bhaga, parietal andre horaginadu. So, visceral pericardium or epicardium is a serous layer. Next is a massive zone of myocardial region. These are cardiac muscles. Now, the cardiac muscles, this is the myocardium region. Inner to that is a layer of epithelial cells, which we call it as endocardium, with both connective tissue as well as epithelium. Now, this layers of the heart makes it a very strong functioning organ. Imagine if we want to pump water from our sump to the what you call tank above, we need so much of power, HP of power motors, but imagine your heart can just do the same function with muscles and the coverings. Now, this is one of the wonders what we see in biological world. Now, we will go to the anatomy of the human heart. Now, this is the anatomy. If I take a section from top to bottom, I call it as longitudinal section. So, this is a longitudinal section of the human heart. Now, this heart has basically, you can see the wall of the heart. This is pink portion, this portion is what we refer to as wall of the heart. Now, this wall of the heart, left part is thicker compared to the right heart. Now, this right part of the heart is less, whereas left part has more. Now, human heart is divided into 4 chambers. The top 2 chambers, what I find here, are called as atria. So, I call it right atrium and left atrium. The lower 2 chambers are larger, and these 2 chambers are called as the ventricles. We call it right and left ventricle. Why is this 4 chamber? These 2 are the receiving chambers. They receive the blood, and these 2 pump the blood. So, they are called as pumping chambers. Now, this atria are separated by a septum. Septum means wall. That is called Inter-Atrial Septum. Similarly, between the ventricles, this is the Interventricular Septum. Now, this septum is nothing but your cardiac muscles itself. The atria and ventricles are also separated here, but there is an aperture, there is an opening. Aperture means opening. Now, these opening on the right side is guarded by tricuspid valve, and the left side is guarded by mitral or bicuspid valve. Now, mitra andre enu? What does that mean? Now, it is an English hat. Basically, it is a hat which has two projections. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅದನ್ನು ಮಿಟ್ರಲ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ವ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಅಂದರೆ ಟೂ ಪ್ರೊಜೆಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲಿ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅದನ್ನು ಮಿಟ್ರಲ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ವ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಹಿಯರ್ ಯು ಶುಡ್ ನೋಟ್, ಏಟ್ರಿಯಾ ಅಂತಾನೆ ಕರಿಬೇಕು ಇದನ್ನು. ವಿ ಆರ್ ನಾಟ್ ಸಪೋಸ್ ಟು ಕಾಲ್ ಇಟ್ ಆರಿಕಲ್. ಆರಿಕಲ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಕಿವಿ, ಡಾಗ್ಸ್ ಇಯರ್. ಈ ಡಾಗ್ಸ್ ಇಯರ್ ನೀವು ನೋಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ, ಡ್ರೂಪ್ಸ್ ಡೌನ್, ಅಂದರೆ ಒಂಥರ ಫಾಲ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಇಯರ್. ಆ ಥರ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ದೆರ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಎ ಫಾಲ್ of fat tissue. Actually, that is the auricle portion. So, right atrium, left atrium separated by inter-atrial septum, right ventricle, left ventricle separated by interventricular septum, and atrioventricular septum, which is perforated on both sides. Right side guarded by tricuspid valve, left side guarded by mitral valve or bicuspid valve. This is about the heart. Now, let us look into the vessels which carry the blood away from the heart and which carry the blood towards the heart. Please note, always convention, artery is away from the heart, veins towards the heart. Artery carries the blood away from the heart, so that artery is what is carrying out, arrow marks point it out, and veins bring in the blood. Here we can see the right atrium has the opening of superior and inferior vena cava. It brings all the deoxygenated blood. Please don't call it as impure blood. You should always refer it as in a scientific way. It is called deoxygenated blood. Andre oxygen upayogiskondu carbon dioxide filled blood comes from all cells, all tissues, from all parts of the body to the right atrium. That is why it is indicated in blue color. Into the left atrium, there is opening of pulmonary vein. Now, this vein brings in oxygenated blood, andre oxygen filled blood to the left part of the heart from the lungs after oxygenation. Now, both these atria will pump the blood into the ventricles simultaneously. So, it is at one contraction the blood enters into the respective ventricles. Now, the left and right ventricle have chambers which are larger. Now, this will pump the blood towards all the tissues of the body. Now, from the right side you can see it is again blue. The pulmonary artery carries the blood to both the lungs. You can see the branching here, one goes to the left and one goes to the right lung for oxygenation. Whereas, from the left ventricle there is a largest artery. Please note, this is very important, largest artery of the human body, that is called aorta. It carries the blood to all parts of the body. Imagine this left heart has to function to every cell in your body, right from the head to the toe. So, it just traverses down, branches to the right and left, and here you can see these three arteries branching out will supply to the head, neck and brain. So, aorta is major artery which supplies blood to all the parts of the body. So, what are the blood vessels? Enter in superior and inferior vena cava to the right atrium and the pulmonary vein to the left atrium. What leaves the heart is the pulmonary artery from the right ventricle and aorta from the left ventricle. Please note, blood can just come back if there is no valve. Valve antandre something to stop the flow. So, here we have tricuspid and bicuspid valve which keeps the blood in atria, and only when the pressure increases both open and enter into the respective ventricles. So, tricuspid bicuspid valve will open and close. Here it is called semilunar valve. This is semilunar valve of aorta, semilunar valve of pulmonary artery. We call this as aortic semilunar valve, pulmonary semilunar valve. Another ee kade blood barattalla from superior inferior vena cava or from the pulmonary veins, there are all called spinsters, muscular spinsters, andre muscle contract agate, open agate. This is the gross anatomy. Now, we will go to a little bit of finer anatomy. This is actually the section of the heart what you can see in nature. Ee valve open and close, something has to regulate. What regulates it? ಅಂದರೆ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ವ್ ಓಪನ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ಕ್ಲೋಸ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೆ ಅದು ಪುಲ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಪುಷ್ಗೆ ಹೆಂಗಾಗತ್ತೆ? ವೆನ್ ದ ಏಟ್ರಿಯಾ ಕಾಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟ್, this valve will be shut. tricuspid valve, bicuspid valve. These are called papillary muscles. These are called papillary muscles which are found in the human heart in the ventricles. ಇದು ಹೆಂಗೆ ಅಂದರೆ ನಾನೊಂದು ಡೋರ್ಗೆ ಎಲಾಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಕಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನನ್ನ ಕೈ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಎಂಡ್ ಐ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಹೋಲ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ಇಟ್. ನಾನು ಹಿಂದೆ ಹೋದರೆ ಆ ಎಲಾಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಪುಲ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಡೋರ್ ಓಪನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ನಾನು ಎಲಾಸ್ಟಿಕ್ನ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಮುಂದೆ ಹೋದರೆ ಎಲಾಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ವಿಲ್ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಕಾಂಪ್ರಿಹೆಂಡ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದ ಡೋರ್ ಗೆಟ್ ಶಟ್. ಜೋರಾಗಿ ಬ್ಯಾಂಗ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೇಮ್ ಪ್ರಿನ್ಸಿಪಲ್ ಹಿಯರ್. When the ventricles contract, the papillary muscles have this part. These are called heart strings. These are called as heart strings or chordae tendinae. Please note the word chordae tendinae. I have written it later. I will just show it to you. Now these chordae tendinae, the papillary muscle contract adaga just gets pushed, the valves shut with a great force. When the heart relaxes, it is relaxing. Contraction is this one, relaxing is this one. When the heart relaxes, papillary muscle will pull, the chordae tendinae also gets pulled back, the valves open. So opening and closing of the valves depends on the heart wall and these papillary muscles. So these chordae tendinae play a very important role in the contraction and relaxation of the ventricles. This is the anatomy what you can see, and these are the semilunar valves what you can see in the ಪಿಕ್ಚರ್. ಓಕೆ, ನೀವು ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಇವಾಗ ಈ ಹೃದಯದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ತಿಳ್ಕೊಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಮೇಲಿನ 2 ಕವಾಟಗಳಿದೆ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅದು 2 ರಿಸೀವಿಂಗ್ ಚೇಂಬರ್ಸ್, ಬ್ಲಡ್ನ ರಿಸೀವ್ ಮಾಡೋವಂಥದ್ದು. ಲೋಯರ್ 2 ಚೇಂಬರ್ಸ್ ಪಂಪ್ ಮಾಡೋವಂಥ ಚೇಂಬರ್ಸ್. ಇದನ್ನು ಏಟ್ರಿಯಾ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ, ರೈಟ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಲೆಫ್ಟ್. ಇದೆರಡೂ ವೆಂಟ್ರಿಕಲ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಈ ಏಟ್ರಿಯಾ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ವೆಂಟ್ರಿಕಲ್ಸ್ 4 ಚೇಂಬರ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಅವುಗಳ ಸಪ್ರೇಷನ್ ಬಂದು ಸೆಪ್ಟಮ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಗೋಡೆಗಳ ತರಹ ಇಂಟರ್-ಏಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ ಸೆಪ್ಟಮ್. ಇಂಟರ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ಒಂದು ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ಗೂ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ಗೂ ಮಧ್ಯ ಕಾಂಪಿಟೇಷನ್ಗೆ ಇಂಟರ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ಅದೇ ಥರ ಒಂದು ಏಟ್ರಿಯಾಗೂ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಏಟ್ರಿಯಾಗೂ ಮಧ್ಯ ಇರೋದು ಇಂಟರ್-ಏಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ ಸೆಪ್ಟಮ್. ಮತ್ತು 2 ವೆಂಟ್ರಿಕಲ್ಗಳ ಮಧ್ಯೆ ಇರೋದು ಇಂಟರ್ ವೆಂಟ್ರಿಕ್ಯುಲಾರ್ ಸೆಪ್ಟಮ್. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿ, ಲೆಫ್ಟ್ ವೆಂಟ್ರಿಕ್ಯುಲಾರ್ ಸೈಜ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ವಾಲ್ ಇಸ್ ಮೋರ್ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಇಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಟು ಪಂಪ್. ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆಗೆ ಪಂಪ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಅದರ ಥಿಕ್ನೆಸ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದೇ ರೈಟ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಕಂಪ್ಯಾರಿಟಿವ್ಲಿ ಕಮ್ಮಿ. ಯಾಕೆಂದರೆ ಅದು ಬರೀ ಲಂಗ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಕ್ಯಾರಿ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಯಾವುದು ಕ್ಯಾರಿ ಮಾಡೋದು? ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಪಲ್ಮನರಿ ಆರ್ಟ್ರಿ ವಿಚ್ ಕ್ಯಾರೀಸ್ ದ ಬ್ಲಡ್. ನಾವು ಪಲ್ಮನರಿ ವೇನ್ಸ್ ಬ್ರಿಂಗ್ ದಟ್ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಟು ದ ಹಾರ್ಟ್, ಆಕ್ಸಿಜನೇಟೆಡ್ ಬ್ಲಡ್ನ. ಡಿಆಕ್ಸಿಜನೇಟೆಡ್ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಇಸ್ ಬ್ರಾಟ್ ಬೈ ದ ಸುಪೀರಿಯರ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಇನ್ಫೀರಿಯರ್ ವೇನ ಕವಾ ಇನ್ ಟು ದ ರೈಟ್ ಏಟ್ರಿಯಮ್. ಸೊ ರೈಟ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ ಡಿಆಕ್ಸಿಜನೇಟೆಡ್ ಬ್ಲಡ್, ಲೆಫ್ಟ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಕ್ಸಿಜನೇಟೆಡ್ ಬ್ಲಡ್. ಇದನ್ನು ಕ್ಯಾರಿ ಮಾಡೋದು ಯಾವುದು? ಆಕ್ಸಿಜನೇಟೆಡ್ ಬ್ಲಡ್ನ ಕ್ಯಾರಿ ಮಾಡೋದು ಟು ಆಲ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಬಾಡಿ, ಅಯೋರ್ಟಾ, ಲಾರ್ಜೆಸ್ಟ್ ಆರ್ಟ್ರಿ. ದ ಪಲ್ಮನರಿ ಆರ್ಟ್ರಿ is carrying deoxygenated blood for oxygenation into the lungs. So heart and lungs, they go always together. ಅದು ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆನೆ. this is a link between your respiration and circulation. So this is a brief of all the explanation I told you. The chambers of the heart, 4 chambered, upper 2 receiving, lower 2 pumping chambers. Septa, inter-atrial septa and interventricular septa, atrioventricular septa, what already I mentioned. Left ventricular wall is thicker to right. Papillary muscles and chordae tendinae helps in opening and closing of the valves. So this much is clear. Next, blood vessels of the heart into the right atrium opens, superior and inferior vena cava. Similarly, into the left ಯಾವುದು ಓಪನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ? ಪಲ್ಮನರಿ ವೇನ್ಸ್. From the base of the left ventricle ಯಾವುದು ಹೋಗೋದು? ಆರ್ಟ್ರಿ, that is aorta. Similarly, from the base of the right ventricle ಯಾವ ಆರ್ಟ್ರಿ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ? ಪಲ್ಮನರಿ ಆರ್ಟ್ರಿ. So this is very simple and diagram ನೋಡಿಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಆರಾಮಾಗಿ ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಚರ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಹಾರ್ಟ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. Next is atrioventricular aperture valves and sphincters. Tricuspid valve, RTO ಜ್ಞಾಪಕ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. Right is always tricuspid. RTO ಜ್ಞಾಪಕ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ right is tricuspid. Similarly, left is bicuspid valve or mitral valve. Bicuspid ಅಂದರೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹಲ್ಲು 2 ಕಸ್ಪ್ಸ್ ಇರುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಪ್ರಿಮೋಲಾರ್ಸ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ 2 ಕಸ್ಪ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ವಾ, ಅದೇ ಥರ. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್, ಓಪನಿಂಗ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಅಯೋರ್ಟಾ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಪಲ್ಮನರಿ ಆರ್ಟರಿ ಆರ್ ಗಾರ್ಡೆಡ್ ಬೈ ರೆಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟಿವ್. ರೆಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಅಯೋರ್ಟಿಕ್ ಸೆಮಿಲೂನಾರ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್, ಪಲ್ಮನರಿ ಸೆಮಿಲೂನಾರ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಮತ್ತು ವೇನ್ಸ್ಗೆಲ್ಲನೂ ಸ್ಪಿನ್ಸ್ಟರ್ಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಒಂದು ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಥಿಂಗ್ ಅಡಿಷ್ನಲ್ ನೋಟ್ ಏನು, ಹುಟ್ಟೋ ತನಕ ಇನ್ ದ ಎಂಬ್ರಿಯಾನಿಕ್ ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಅಂದರೆ ತಾಯಿಯ ಗರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿರಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಈ ರೈಟ್ ಮತ್ತು ಲೆಫ್ಟ್ ಏಟ್ರಿಯಾ ಮಧ್ಯ ಅಪರ್ಚರ್ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಯಾವುದದು septum, that is called Inter-Atrial Septum, that will have a small opening, that will have a hole, that is called foramen ovale. Now this is very important for communication. Why it is there? We don't know. Anatomy. Now this will close up by the time the child is born, but there is a small depression created, that is called fossa ovalis. Please note, ಈ ಎರಡು ಟರ್ಮು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಕಾಂಪಿಟೇಟಿವ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳೋಂಥ ಸಾಧ್ಯತೆ ಇದೆ. ನಾವು ಇಯರ್ಸ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟೆನ್ಷನ್ ಅವಾಗಲೇ ಹೇಳಿದೆ, ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆರಿಕಲ್, ಡಾಗ್ಸ್ ಇಯರ್, that is what you see in the anatomy of the heart. I will show you some of the anatomical structures. This is what is the human heart, how it looks like. ಹಾರ್ಟನ್ನು ತೆಗೆದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಮನುಷ್ಯನಿಂದ ಈ ಥರ ಕಾಣಿಸುತ್ತೆ, ಮತ್ತು ಕಟ್ ಸೆಕ್ಷನ್, ಲಾಂಜಿಟ್ಯೂಡ್ನಲ್ ಸೆಕ್ಷನ್ ತೆಗೆದ್ರೆ ಈ ಥರ ಕಾಣಿಸುತ್ತೆ. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಸಿ ವೆರಿ ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ಲಿ ಪ್ಯಾಪಿಲರಿ ಮಸಲ್ಸ್, ಕಾರ್ಡೇಟ್ ಎಂಡಿನೆ, ವ್ಯಾಲ್ವ್ಸ್. ವ್ಯಾಲ್ವ್ಸ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಹೆಂಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ. This is how the valves are present. Now this is the right atrium, right ventricle, this is the left ventricle. Left ventricle is very large, you can see the thickness of the wall. Now this is what you find left atrium and you find the right atrium here. Illi ondu fat deposition idella, idu this will droop down as what you call it as auricle. That is what you see it as auricle. But in lower forms, for example you take it in frog nalli ಇನ್ನೂ ಎರಡು ಚೇಂಬರ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಅದನ್ನು ಟ್ರಂಕಸ್ ಆರ್ಟೀರಿಯೋಸಿಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ಅಡಿಷನಲ್ ಚೇಂಬರ್ಸ್. ದೆನ್ ಸಮ್ ಆಫ್ ದೀಸ್ ಟರ್ಮ್ಸ್, ಯೂಸ್ಟೇಕಿಯನ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ವ್, ಥಿಬೀಸಿಯನ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ವ್, ಡಕ್ಟಸ್ ಆರ್ಟೀರಿಯೋಸಿಸ್, pericarditis, rheumatic endocarditis. These are all something which I suggest. Even Google is guru, so we are also doing online. You please see, just try to get the meaning of this. We will just go ahead with this in the conclusion of this topic.